What's up, everybody? Welcome to the final group stage World Cup recap here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of my upcoming videos throughout the remainder of the World Cup. And to find my written work, you can scan this QR code that is on the screen right next to me. That will take you to my Substack, where you can become a subscriber and get all my written content delivered directly to your inbox. What a way to start the final day of the group stage. Two groups to finalize to see who these final few teams in the round of 16 are going to be. And the big story of this final day was what South Korea were able to do, and South Korea coming out of nowhere kind of to clinch a spot in the round of 16. They go behind to Portugal, equalized midway through the first half. So there was always sort of that hope that if you could get another goal, things were going to get really interesting and there was a real chance South Korea could go through. I'm going to get to the other game that was also playing a role in how this was all going to play out. But ultimately, finally, Son Heung-min has his moment. And no, he was not the player who scored the goal, but Portugal creates some chances. It was a very heavily changed Portugal team, knowing they were already through to the round of 16 and in a very good position to clinch the top spot in this group no matter what happened. And so right at the beginning of stoppage time, off of a Portugal corner, Son picks the ball up, dribbles 50, 60 yards, just kind of this one-man counterattack. He holds the ball up to let, I think it was only a player. I think it was just two. I mean, it wasn't like this was some kind of large-scale counterattack. But he holds the ball up enough to let Hwang Hee-chan enter the conversation for this play. Son feeds in the ball, Hwang scores, and all of a sudden, South Korea go from not being in the round of 16 to being minutes away. As long as they don't concede a goal and as long as the Uruguay score stays the same, they're going through. And that is exactly what happened. It was a phenomenal moment. The scenes were incredible. And I do want to take a moment to talk about the South Korea team and my reason for optimism for this team. And I didn't think they had enough, in all honesty, with Son's injury and some of the other stuff they're dealing with and just the realities of this group. I didn't think they had enough to go through. But I did say I really like this team, and my reason for optimism was, specifically in attack, this is not a one-man show. Yes, you need to have that world-class difference maker. Son is just that special of a player. He's going to have to carry this team. It's just the reality of the situation. But that doesn't necessarily mean he has to score all the goals. You go back and look in qualifying, there were plenty of other players contributing. The player who scored this decisive goal, and by the way, Son didn't score a goal and they got through the group stage. I mean, Hwang Hee-chan, playing at the highest level, multiple top 5 European leagues. He is also a very good goal scorer. And, he hasn't really been able to be a factor because of fitness concerns, but he does make the bench, comes on, makes a huge impact. And, by the way, Kim Min-jae, one of the better center backs in the world, one of the surprises of this season for Napoli, getting all kinds of, rightfully so. His value has just skyrocketed, and his stock is going through the roof because he's phenomenal. Wasn't available for this game, and they still found a way to get through. This is a deeper team than people give them credit for. Obviously, there are teams with way more depth. There's a team with more depth in this group that didn't go through. But you got your one moment you needed from Son, and it didn't have to be a goal. That was really one of the things I wanted to emphasize in my preview for South Korea. There are other players who can capitalize. What you don't have is somebody who can take a ball 60 yards and kind of beat a defense by himself. That's the kind of stuff they're going to need Son to do. That's exactly what he did in this game. And he's playing in the round of 16 because of it. South Korea are through to the round of 16 because of it. Nothing really on the Portugal side of this. They're going to be just fine. The ability to rest players was nice. It's not like they performed poorly. You do catch the break when you're South Korea, and a couple other teams were in this situation where you play the favorite last, there's always that chance that if they win the first two games, you're going to get a heavily rotated squad and you're going to be able to capitalize a little bit. And the opportunity was presented, and South Korea took full advantage, and they're going through the round of 16 because of it. Now, the team that was looked like they were going through for most of these games was Uruguay. And, the storylines write themselves for a Ghana-Uruguay rematch. And it's another Uruguay penalty save against Ghana that sort of kicks this game into gear. But soon after that, Georgian Deriscata scores twice. Second was a really, really good goal. Be sure to check that if you haven't seen it already. And so early in this game, it's 2-0 Uruguay. It's not like they saved this late. They put the goals on the board they needed to. They just ultimately didn't do enough because they couldn't seal this deal. South Korea kept themselves in the game, knew if they got that one moment, they could steal that win. That's exactly what happened. And so Uruguay are going home. They did finally get the offensive spark from Deriscata that they've been waiting for this entire tournament. It didn't come from Cavani. It didn't come from Suarez. It didn't come from Federico Valverde. It didn't come from the players you expected. I mean, Valverde had moments here or there. But this is another story of ultimately over 3 games, they just weren't good enough. I would probably argue, and pretty strongly, South Korea were the better team over 3 games than Uruguay. These are some of the bigger countries that are going home, your Belgiums, your Uruguays, those kind of teams. It's not like it was unfair that somehow they just caught these terrible series of breaks. And, one bizarre goal was what did them in, and they really deserved to go through. And this is where it is different than an NCAA tournament, for example, and where I'm willing to put much more value in a 3-game performance than a single elimination knockout tournament from start to finish. Weird things happen when you have to win every single game. But you have 3 opportunities to get this right. And Uruguay almost did enough, but at the end of the day, they didn't get the goals they needed earlier in the group stage, and they put themselves in a bad position where they needed a lot to go right in this game, and they did their part to a certain extent, but they didn't check every single box that they needed to in order to get out of this group. And so you can just add them to the list of really disappointing teams. I was really high on this team. They just didn't do enough offensively. They didn't get enough out of their star players. And, one of the other questions I had was, what do Cavani and Suarez have left? Because this team was still heavily relying on them from a goal scoring, minutes at the striker position. And they didn't get what they needed. And so they are also going home, and justifiably so, in my opinion, based on what happened through these 3 games. Then on to the other set of games to round out the group stage. Switzerland get a 3-2 win over Serbia. The political context to this game always makes it incredibly fascinating. The entertainment value was there, at least in the first half. Xherdan Shaqiri opens the scoring. I think that makes him the 3rd player behind Ronaldo and Messi to score at the last 3 men's World Cups, if I remember that stat correctly. That's pretty good company to be in if you're Xherdan Shaqiri. But right after that, Serbia, your 2 goal scorers, Alexander Mitrovic, Dusan Vlahovic, both get a goal. All of a sudden, it is 2-1 Serbia, and Serbia are in position to go through at the expense of Switzerland. And then Switzerland equalize, and then Switzerland get a 3rd goal. And after that, there really wasn't much happening. For 50 or so minutes, it felt like every time somebody scored, the other team was just going to come back and answer, and that we were going to get, 4-3 or something like that. And once it got to 3-2, Switzerland were able to really shut the game down and sort of restore some order, knowing that they were probably fine with a draw. Certainly, they had what they needed with the lead, and they just kind of set up shop and were able to see the game out. Now, you did have some comings together in stoppage time. That's certainly was born out of frustration from a Serbia standpoint and just the reality of these two countries playing each other. But the story of this tournament for Serbia is the blown leads. They put themselves in positions to get out of this group on multiple occasions, and they just couldn't hold leads. And so the end result where they are in this group looks way worse than the way that they actually performed in this tournament. This was one of the teams I was really, really high on. I had them coming out of this group. I mean, they nearly did it. They had it in their grasp on the final day, just couldn't hold on to it. And that is the biggest story for Serbia in this tournament is they got the goals they needed. They got themselves leads and just could not shut up shop and just see a game out. And they didn't pull the upset against Brazil, and so you have leads in the other two games, you don't see them out, and this is the end result of that. So congratulations to Switzerland. Really, really fascinating team. Just from you're never quite convinced they have enough talent to really play with the best teams in the world, but you also want no part of them because they have sort of this it factor about them. They have these dynamic players, Xhaka, Shaqiri, sort of maybe not Xhaka is probably a controversial figure, although he's been great for Arsenal this season. Just kind of these wild card guys that you don't really know what to expect from, but when they're on, they're incredibly dangerous. You saw that in this game. And so Switzerland are the team going through. And then finally, congratulations, Cameroon go out of the World Cup with a bang. Got sort of close to being able to come out of this group. Just they didn't. They waited too long to get the goal. Didn't ever look like getting a second one. Needed some things to happen in the other game that didn't. They gave themselves a shot, and they have a win over Brazil to take away from this tournament. By the way, that's the first time Brazil has lost in the group stage since 1998. Also, before I sort of talk about this game, want to take a moment. Congratulations to Nuhu, MLS legend himself. He got Anthony pretty good a couple times. You also remember Nuhu had a phenomenal performance against Mo Salah. Say what you want about MLS defending, and Nuhu certainly has his moments where you wonder what he is doing, and he just kind of goes out there with reckless abandon. But there are other times where Nuhu is locking down some of the best creative players in the world, so I wanted to give him his props because he had some really good moments in this game against those Brazilian attackers. Now, it was the Brazilian B team, which features, Gabriel Martinelli and Gabriel Jesus and Antony and those kind of players. But there's another situation. Brazil knew they were already through, knew they were probably topping the group. You certainly expected that group of 11 players to be able to get a point, which they didn't, and it ended up not hurting them. It was just a 0-0. Brazil had some pretty good opportunities. Cameroon had a chance here or there until the very end where Vincent Aboubakar gets another goal in this tournament. It looked like I'm going to assume he forgot he was on a yellow card. He takes his shirt off. He gets a second yellow. Also, MLS connection, Ismail Alfath refereeing this game. So some MLS prominence in this one. So he gets a second yellow right after scoring a goal that, was not enough to get Cameroon through. Seemed like he just forgot in the moment. And hey, you scored at a World Cup against Brazil. It was kind of a walk-off winner sort of thing. Really cool moment for him, even with the red card. He was just kind of smiling about it at the end. But congratulations, Cameroon, and this is also a good moment to talk about how good overall these African teams have been at this tournament. And you look at also the Asian teams, obviously with South Korea going through, what Japan did. You can go down the list. The disappointments, by and large, a little bit of South America, specifically Uruguay. That's about it. And right, your CONCACAF teams outside of the U.S. did not really show up. Costa Rica, that's not fair to Costa Rica. Costa Rica came pretty close and played better than I expected. So, some disappointments in CONCACAF, Uruguay, and, most of the disappointments the UEFA teams. And the teams that capitalized, Asia and Africa. It's not, Africa didn't send a million teams through to the round of 16, but you look at what Morocco did. You look at the amount of African teams that got wins that gave themselves opportunities heading into that final game. Their overall record was very, very good in this tournament. Also, of course, Senegal going through. So congratulations to the African nations. It was a rough go in 2018. Really good performance so far, and we'll see what kind of impact they can make in the round of 16 because there are multiple, there are African representatives there, which is always a really cool thing to see. So Cameroon out, but another really memorable moment in what has been a very good World Cup for the continent of Africa. That is all for today's recap. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.